Mr. Lyons, how are you today?
I am excellent, thank you. How are you?
Well, you're looking very good today. Maybe that's
Yeah,
just what you want us to think.
yeah, that's I have to fake it with an image. Have to.
Good morning, everyone. I just want to make note, it's Darlene Lombardi speaking, that we are now live on YouTube.
Do you wish for me to start the meeting now or wait until 10 o'clock proper?
10 o'clock proper would be appropriate. Tara, I know you're waiting for Mr. Birch to join us. Would you like to wait a few moments for that, or would you like to commence?
Well, let's start on time if we can, assuming that everyone else who is a delegation, is here. And it does start with roll call. So is it Councillor Van Tilburg opening up the meeting, or yourself?
Councillor Van Tilburg will open the meeting, and I will take roll call.
I see. Okay. Yeah, I believe Mr. Birch is making his best effort to log into the meeting, and so I guess if he does show up in the middle of it, just keep an eye out, Darlene.
Will do. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Hang on a sec. There we are. It's 10 o'clock. Welcome, everyone. This meeting is now called to order. The roll has been taken. I would just like to remind members of the Mohawk Lake Working Group of a few procedural rules to assist in the meeting in operating as efficiently as possible. All members are to remain muted when not speaking for the meeting to reduce feedback. All web cameras for Mohawk Lake District Working Group members shall be turned on. Staff will be requested to join the video meeting should the need to answer a question arise. Persons who have registered for this meeting and who are speaking to items on the agenda will be brought into the meeting upon the introduction of the item. Any member of the Mohawk Lake District Working Group should indicate they wish to speak by pressing the raised hand button on the participants list screen. In the event a connection or service disruption occurs that affects quorum of the Mohawk Lake District Working Group, we may recess the meeting for up to 15 minutes to regain quorum. If quorum is not achieved, the meeting will be adjourned.
Councillor Van Tilburg, I will take official roll call at this time.
Very good.
Okay, Mayor Davis.
I'm present.
Councillor Martin.
Here.
Councillor Carpenter.
Here.
Councillor Van Tilburg.
Present.
Councillor Utley.
Present.
And Councillor Vanderstel.
Present.
And we do have quorum. Thank you.
Thank you. All members of the Mohawk Lake District Working Group participating via online video conference will vote by physical show of hands. The chair will indicate to leave your hands raised until he has determined the result of the vote. Finally, thank you for your patience as we navigate this new pathway. Are there any declarations of conflict of interest on today's agenda? Seeing none. Members of the working group, there are 3 delegates for today's meeting. Each delegate will have 10 minutes inclusive of questions of the working group in keeping with the City of Brantford's procedural bylaw 15.6.2. Please ensure that all comments are directly related to the matter before the Mohawk Lake District Group. And with that, I would like to ask Rita Marie Hadley and Scott Lyons to come forward to speak to the item 4.1 Mohawk Lake District Real Estate Strategy. Please note you have 10 minutes for your remarks inclusive of questions from the working group.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Scott Lyons and Rita Marie is with me. It doesn't appear like my camera's on. I apologize, but we didn't come with a a full presentation. The working group is, I think, very well aware of Lansdowne and our expression of interest. So we'll leave a lot of time for questions. I want to just really thank. There we go. Was I in before? Or should I start over again?
Yeah, no, I heard you. I'm hoping the others did as well.
All right. Thank you,
Now
Mr. Chair.
it's good to see you.
You as well. So we'll leave as much time for questions as possible. I want to thank Ron for hosting the PIC session there a couple of weeks ago, and Tara for responding to the different replies on the Let's Talk Brantford site. Very, very encouraging for us. I mean, the people that were registering and commenting, asking questions at the PIC. The questions were, how can the community support Lansdowne to have this come to fruition? So very, very encouraging for us. Rita Marie?
Thank you very much. Yes, I apologize. I just had brief technical difficulties, and I would like to echo the gratitude of Lansdowne Children's Center for the opportunity to engage with the community and to get to this stage. And we've been fortunate to have the attention of council as this site has been remediated and developed. And I would say just in parallel that Lansdowne Children's Center and the kids here are also growing and developing. So the urgency continues, notwithstanding that COVID has brought out some of the most creative families, kids, and staff here to be able to work during COVID times. And so while we are bringing virtual services into our mix, particularly this most recent lockdown and stay-at-home orders is also reminding us of how acutely important physical space is, the right physical space is. So we are committed to working with the city around the next steps for this, and very grateful and happy to answer any questions.
Well, thank you both. With that, there are currently 2 hands up for questions. Councillor Carpenter, if you'd like to go first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Now, the resolution talks about purchase and sale, but you're not looking like as spending a lot of money on this property, are you? As I understand it, I thought you were looking for a nominal amount.
That's correct.
Okay. Now, does it require that you purchase a property, or could you do a land lease? Does the land lease still work?
That came up at one of the working group meetings before, and it's my understanding as you work through exactly what the dispositions look like, as we go to the province to leverage the support from the community, which of course includes the city. Outright ownership and basically a donation or a nominal purchase price will help us and leverage municipal contributions against the other 2 levels of government. So that would be our preference.
Okay, just to follow up to that then, would you still be okay with it in the clause of the sale, the nominal sale? And I'm okay with that, quite frankly. But would you be okay if the agreement said that if Lansdowne was to ever vacate the site, that the property would revert back to the city for the same price that you paid for it?
I would think so. I mean, we'll go through all those details. We have sort of a similar setup with the existing location. So, understanding that the city is going through this process to support Lansdowne. If for some reason Lansdowne was removed from that picture, then that would certainly be understandable.
Yeah, just looking to protect the asset for the community. All right, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Carpenter. Councillor Utley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Scott and Rita Marie, good morning to you both. Are you looking for this site as having your own parking, or would you consider a shared parking with other interested groups?
We actually worked together with the architects for de droit de Desnay so that the planning of the parking and even the situating of the building was optimal around sharing at peak times. And so that allows for overflow considerations, and the parking was also pivotal around creating a buffer as appropriate for continuing uses on the site. So that is one good aspect of this particular site on Mohawk Lake. 66 Mohawk does give that ability to be contiguous with the parking planned for de droit de Desnay, which makes it quite flexible.
Thank you, Rita Marie. My second question is timing. What's your ideal time for construction and transferring from Mount Pleasant to Mohawk Greenwich?
Time traveling yesterday? No, actually, yeah. We are in a significant time frame relative to political processes, but also for the provincial infrastructure planning. It is a process that needs milestones, and to be able to move to the next one, the designation of an address is critical. Which, until that is confirmed, it does delay us. However, once approved, there are Infrastructure Ontario processes that would see this moving through stages with approvals similar to what our counterparts have experienced across the province. So it may be several years.
I'm sorry, Marie, for interrupting. Are you already working with a build designer?
We have, yes, we have significant details that have been into the ministry for over a year around the specifics of the design, and they need an address to go with them. So
basically you want to get shoveled in the ground as soon as possible.
We need to align all those resources to go with it, correct, yes.
And lastly, Mr. Chair, my question is similar to Councillor Carpenter's of the disposition of the current site where you're located now, and I guess there are 2 or 3 options that could be open for discussion about the disposal of the site. My question is, were you banking on the sale of the site and the proceeds of the current site to fund the new location?
Yes, that was part of it. Part of the funding for the new location deals with the 3 sites that currently create our property where we're located. The sale of 2 of them and of our building would be relating to the financing for the new site. I think Scott probably had something supplementary as well to me.
But just to follow up with that, Councillor Hartley, and it was Heidi's suggestion, the way things are put together with the potential MOU, that as we look at the timeline, that going to that next step helps us continue to stay in motion with the province, understanding that they're going to want likely firm ownership for the next phase of that, by allowing us to proceed with an MOU, hopefully shortly thereafter, actually finalizing agreement of purchase and sale, that will keep things fluid to move along with the other levels of government as quickly as we can. So thank you.
Thank you, Scott. So does Lansdowne own the current property, or is it owned by the ministry?
No, the current property, Lansdowne owns the building, but it's a land lease, not from the ministry, though.
All right.
I would say the majority of the land is Lansdowne's. It's just the fact that there are 3 different properties that create our current site.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Hartley. Mayor Davis, you've got about a minute.
A minute. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'll just ask 2 quick questions, then you can take however long you want to answer it. And one is, the service area for this building and what will be happening in this building goes beyond the city of Brantford. Of course, it includes the county of Brant, Haldimand, Norfolk, 6 Nations as well. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
Yeah. So could you tell us, please, what the financing arrangements will be? I mean, how much you expect the province will pay, how much you'll have to raise, like percentage-wise, in terms of fundraising, and whether you'll be making a request, donation request to the other governments in the other areas will be serviced, such as Haldeman, Norfolk, County Brant, and Six Nations. And then thirdly, the last question, very interested in how these lands will serve and interconnect with the surrounding neighborhood. What will be done in this building that may be of particular interest in respect to the surrounding neighborhoods? Sorry,
Happy to-
there's a bunch of questions in there very quickly.
No, actually, I'm pleased with the opportunity. I would like to elaborate. While we have a mandate to serve Brant, Haldeman, Norfolk, Six Nations, and Mississaugas of the Credit, we also do have 4 service sites in Haldeman and Norfolk. So the mandate has us deploy our teams in different ways, including those physical sites in Haldeman and Norfolk. So there's less dependence for that cohort, even though there might be specialized services they will need to travel that they can only receive at this site. The intention is to be, as we've been keeping all of the political leaders in all of those jurisdictions apprised of our planning, of also appealing to them as to how they can support their residents who will need investment for this part of moving forward, proportionate to how the families in all those jurisdictions use the services. And the particular breakdown relative to the provincial government share and local share tends to be around 10% and approximating the fees related to furnishings, fixtures, and fit outs. And the third point, I'll just do my part and Scott can elaborate, but as to how this interfaces with the neighborhood, in particular, while also providing very accessible and nearby services for rehabilitation, respite, and recreation, the physical building will be something that the neighborhood would find also allows them to have an attachment by use of meeting space after hours, use of recreation space in gymnasia and in a swimming pool that reflects integrated recreation and being part of the neighborhood. So we're feeling that those are all aspects that would make this welcome to the neighborhood and this part of our community.
Just to follow up on that, Mayor Davis, I think the one part there, and if I'm from your perspective, yes, if the city is contributing this with the land and we are providing services that benefit constituents in other municipalities, are we going after them for contributions? And absolutely we will be to support what we're doing as well.
So your finance is very similar to the hospital, a new hospital, I'd say.
Correct.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
Thank you, Mayor Davis. I have a procedural question because I think this topic is very important, and the 2 presenters are the ones that they have the abilities to answer the questions. Can I extend this so that Councillor Martin can ask some questions? Is that in my realm? Because we've hit our 10 minutes. Well, I hear crickets. Councillor Martin, go ahead.
Thank you. I just have one quick question. You were talking about sharing parking with the health facility. Do you have different peak times such that you can utilize most of the parking when your peak is, and they'll have most of the parking at a different time?
We actually do have some areas that we would share as peak. However, again, the full intent of their use when they have all partners on, which again, I'm sure they'll speak to better, would probably see drop off and pick up for childcare, which would have some different peaks. Given that our families are usually in attendance with their child or youth receiving services, it's not so much a pickup drop off mode, but because of the generosity of this site, we probably would not be experiencing difficulties in terms of overlap for quite some time into the future, until a lot of growth saw us needing to be using all those parking spaces available. So it's not envisioned that there will be difficulty. It's more kind of on an event-based basis that we may find the full parking capacity required. And that would be one that would allow us to be very planful with partners on site.
That was one of the issues too, if you'll recall, Councillor Martin, at the beginning, we were looking at a different spot, and we were originally looking for up to maybe 7 acres. And as this is fine tuned and been just reduced somewhat, the advantage of being able to partner with the Droit de Desne, and use some of that shared parking is really what makes it help fit on that site that's reduced a little bit in size. So it's great that we have someone that we can work together with to do that.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Thank you, Scott and Rita Marie. That is everything. Your time is up. You can feel free to stick around and watch the rest of the presentations and questions. I know it'll be exciting.
Thank you very much.
If I could ask Joanne Matina and Constance McKnight to come forward to speak to item 4.1, Mohawk Lake District Real Estate Strategy. Please note you have 10 minutes for your remarks, inclusive of questions from the working group members.
Thank you. On behalf of the Droit de Desne, I just want to say thank you for allowing us to go through this process and to be working with the city of Brantford on this project. I have no presentation, so.
No, that's fine. So Joanne, anything you wish to add to that?
Just echoing what Connie said, this will be a big step for the Indigenous community in Brantford, that we can provide some supports in a meaningful space that will also include land-based healing and space for ceremony.
Wonderful, thank you. Councillor Carpenter, you're first up with questions.
Okay, similar question that I asked the previous group. Are you okay with it, with something in the clause if it's a sale for a nominal price that says if you ever leave the site, the property gets reverted back to the city for the same price?
Absolutely.
Okay, just trying to protect the community. And secondly, could you give us and the viewing public an overview of what the health group does, what exactly the services that you provide? I'm not sure everybody in the community has a clear understanding of all the services that you provide.
Well, for the most part, we provide primary health care, and we provide a number of health promotion activities, traditional healing, patient transportation, mental health and addictions programs. The mental health and addictions programs that we provide are counseling for people who are not in crisis. It's really to support folks through their own healing. And I'm thinking that's all of them, eh, Joanne?
There's also health promotions and diabetes education as well.
Yeah. The diabetes education
Mostly
program.
education and some I mean, when you talk about the addiction, that's those that are already on programs that you're assisting.
Yes.
Yeah, so you're not you don't provide homelessness issues. You don't have people coming there looking for homes and that. Yeah, I think someone think that that's the. Yeah, I want to clarify that for the public that thinks that might be what's going on there, because that community has had a lot of those kinds of issues placed on them, and that they're not looking to have more.
Absolutely. And actually, unless people are there for a specific purpose, you wouldn't see people who are actively using any kind of substance come into our building.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I knew that. I just wanted the public to be clarified that even though they may not be watching now, they may be watching later. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Councillor Utley, your hand was up earlier. Did you still have a question?
I'm good, thanks for now, Mr. Chair.
I believe Mayor Davis, no, Councillor Martin just beat Mayor Davis. Go ahead, Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Councillor Carpenter forgot to ask a second question, which was, would you be good with a land lease instead of a purchase?
I believe that's our preference.
Your preference would be a land lease for a nominal amount? Oh, okay, wonderful, thank you.
Mayor Davis?
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And good morning, Joanne, Constance. So getting to what Councillor Carpenter was asking you, the current services, currently you're at, you're located at King and it's at Darling Street?
Yes.
Yeah. Actually not far from where my legal office, where I used to work in my legal office. So how long have you been in that location?
We've been in that, I would say, block for the last 20 years. We were in a trailer next door for a number of years, and then we purchased the building and moved in, I think 10 or 11 years ago.
Yeah, and I've had tours through there a couple of times. In terms of capacity, where are you at in terms of that building? 90%, 100%, 110%? How would you assess It?
I'd say 200%.
My hearing. Joanne?
I would say we're at 200% capacity. We also rent space at 72 Brant for our mental health programming right now and our health promotions program and traditional healing staff. We do group programming when we can do it in person from the 36 King main site, but right now most of our programming is done virtually. And we do not have any cultural ceremonial space. We have to go to spaces on Six Nations or at Mississaugas.
Right. And how have you integrated with the neighborhood in that area? Any issues?
No.
No. Okay. We've heard from Lansdowne that they talked about kind of interfacing and integration with some of what your organization were doing. Can you tell us a bit more about that? And also I asked them about that group about, interface with the neighborhood, what that might look like and what that might consist of. You might tell us about that.
I'm so sorry. I am really having a hard time hearing. Joanne, can you answer that?
Sure. So we do interface with our community very well, and we anticipate them to have no issues in working with Lansdowne's Children's Center, that we would be able to not only look at the co-parking instance that we've talked about, but we're also looking at some potential programming that they can join. Not all our programming is for the Indigenous community. A lot of our health promotions programming and most of our traditional healing programming is open to the community at large. There is always an Indigenous focus and a cultural component to our programming. So you'll always have a teaching or a lesson that will be provided with any of our programming, but we offer an inclusive, wide range basket of online and in-person programming when we're able to get back to that.
I also believe that we have the ability, working so closely together, to partner on a number of things that we're probably not aware of yet. But I know that we are planning to put in a gym. I know that they're planning to put in a gym. And, it's what happens if they have overflow and we don't have to use our gym that day. So I think that there's really a lot of opportunity to build on a partnership.
Great. And just a statistic that many people aren't aware of, I think, is that 10% of our local population that lives here in Brantford actually has an Indigenous connection or ancestry. Is that correct? If I got that number right? I think it's about 10%.
Yes, however, the Our Health Count studies that have been done around the province have begun to prove that those census statistics are at least half to 1/3 of what the actual number is.
Right, so it's probably double that then.
At least.
Yeah, reflecting our history of the relationship with Indigenous in this area. So you serve then, it is a general nature, it is a general medical clinic in the sense that others are served, and generally where does your clientele come from?
Generally from the city of Brantford.
Yeah.
We may have some folks who come from Six Nations to access service, and often that's because they have people working in their health department who are related or good friends, and it just makes sense that they go somewhere where somebody doesn't know them, and vice versa. There are folks who live in Brantford who go out to Six Nations because they have relatives working in our facility.
Right. Okay. And my last question, if I may, Mr. Chair, I don't want to be hogging the question period. The neighborhood's expressed some concerns. Are you listening, and how will you be responding to some of those concerns, which I think are generally reflective of, I think Councillor Carpenter touched on, a feeling in that neighborhood. I think maybe there's some justification that a lot of the different types of services that impact the neighborhood have been located there, and maybe they've done their bit.
Well, we will be doing active engagement of the community before we start the build. That is absolute. We do want to address everyone's concerns. I really think that once they see that we're in the community, they're going to see us as a resource that they're going to be able to access. And I think it'll be a very positive experience. But I think that, it's always the fear of the unknown. And it's really just about coming out and talking to folks and letting them know who we are. Unfortunately, we're in the middle of this pandemic. And as a health organization, particularly now, our resources are being pulled into public health and the hospital system. But I can foresee, because we would not be putting a shovel into the ground for probably 2 to 3 years, hopefully on the closer to the 2-year side, that in the next year or so, we'll be able to go out and actively engage the community in a proper way.
Right. Okay, thanks very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And thank you, Mayor Davis. I have a few questions of my own. I would put it this way. The community wants you. And I mean, if I'm looking through the feedback, and even some of the, I don't know, are you getting any of the information that we get from the community that sends their comments in? Do you receive those comments?
Yes, we did.
Yeah, so you will then see, they want to engage with Aboriginal community, they want to have a health center. They're asking for all the things that you're providing. And then in those same context, you will see the very guarded responses. And they're very clear, they're very strong in the community. And you answered them very clearly a few weeks ago when we had our public meeting. But you have to say things over and over again. So, and you have to understand is that, we have a community that is already has a saturation point, I would say, with geared to income, low income housing, social run housing from the thing. So that is why, just to put it clear again, I received another email this morning. And so I'm going to hit on a few of the things here, allow you to answer them. It says, I have concerns that in the presentation that they wouldn't be doing harm reduction service because it's not heavy in the neighborhood. What if you, I'll put them all at one time. What if you determine that it is heavy in the neighborhood? Would you bring them in? The other part is that there is a concern for a cooperation with Brant Native Housing and bringing in geared to income housing, which is again, falls in the sphere of what they are not looking for in that area. In other words, people are saying we would like those, but not particularly in the Mohawk Greenwich site. So have at her.
Okay, so in terms of the harm reduction services, there's a difference between being a harm reduction organization and providing harm reduction services. So we are a harm reduction organization. However, it does not mean that we will have a needle exchange site on that property. It does not mean that we do not do methadone or anything like that. We're a primary healthcare clinic. We do not have specialists. This is not our expertise. We do try to support anyone who comes into the building in the best way possible and to refer them to the proper services and supports. And I think that you would find that probably in any primary healthcare organization. So I can say right now, definitively, we will not be having a methadone clinic, we will not be having a needle exchange program, and we will not be having our supervised injection site. We won't have those things on that site. Absolutely.
And again, what about with the housing component?
In terms of the housing, we haven't absolutely nailed down Brantford Native Housing. We have been in negotiation. We do have an absolute solid partner from the Ontario Aboriginal Housing Services. And just like our program in Hamilton, our project, we absolutely expect to have mixed use. We do not expect geared to income. We expect to probably, I believe that they were talking main, it's regular rental minus 10% or something. Like it's not hugely.
So when that comes about, and what you really, and this has been the driving factor of the Mohawk Lake District, has been the community engagement. And you stated, and it's been tough this last year and a bit for sure, because we're used to hundreds of people coming out into a building, and they're very passionate, very vocal. And they love what's being done. And so, here we are at the end. Your comment stating that you would like to get to that physical entity where you can actually, as you say, calm everyone's nerves, get them to see the good of what it is. I mean, I think we can all see it. I believe, look, there is good reason in the community for the way they feel. And I think you're going to win them over in the end. There has not been a lot of people saying no. They're saying just no to certain elements. And I think now you're well aware so that there will be no confusion. And I look forward to that community engagement. So thank you very much. We've gone over our 10 minutes and that's my fault.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Constance and Joanne. All right. Do we have Mr. Birch available?
Councillor Van Tilburg, this is Tara Tran speaking. I am having difficulty getting him online or through the call-in. I don't know what you'd prefer to happen next. I'm having trouble reaching him.
So you're not in contact with him at this time?
I've been trying to phone him back in the number that he reached me at, and there is no one picking up.
All right. Well, as we don't have him online and we're a half an hour into the meeting, we'll have to do a follow-up at another time.
Would you be willing to entertain him if he is able to join at some point during the meeting?
Like, would he have had to have downloaded Zoom to engage, or when he on the phone? Is there a special procedure for using his phone?
That's right. There is a call-in number that we've been trying to make work, and he tells me it is not working.
Okay.
So my alternative is that he phones my personal cell phone, and I somehow get him on speakerphone so that he can speak with you. We'll see what happens.
All right, we'll leave that option open. I say if you do make a connection, we'll change our direction.
Oh, give me a second. I've just got him on the phone.
Mr. Chair, Councillor Van der Stelt's had his hand up for a bit.
Councillor Van der Stelt, what do you wish? Because our time ran out in the previous.
Yeah, sorry, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to make sure that we afforded the same time extension privilege to Joanne and Constance as we did to the former group.
Absolutely.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
And if you wish, we're trying to fill in some time. If you have a question, why not? We have dead air.
Oh, okay. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that, Mr. Chair. Joanne, Constance, I do have a question for you. First of all, thank you for your kindness shown towards our people for so many years while you're over capacity in so many different ways. It's truly a unique and vibrant approach that you're using towards healing, and people are benefiting from it. I want to make sure we thank you for that. Along the lines of the question to Mr. Lyons, when you have different populations coming from different areas and you're servicing quite a broad variety of people coming from a number of different locales and municipalities, what is your current mechanism to go after the funding from those municipalities or those areas?
So we don't have one. The folks that we serve in Hamilton are served out of our Hamilton office. The folks who are served out of Brantford are served from our Brantford office, and the folks served from other areas are served out of those offices. Nothing is mixed. Even when you look at primary care, the folks who access the clinic in Brantford can't access it in Hamilton, or vice versa.
Okay, understood. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Van Tilburg, this is Tara Tran speaking. I have Mr. Birch on the line.
Very good. Let's introduce Mr. Birch. And Mr. Birch, if you can hear me.
I can hear you just fine.
Hey, I'm happy you've managed to connect. I'm sure it can be frustrating at times.
Oh, yeah, it's been very frustrating. I've been trying to talk to council for over a year.
Yeah, do your best with the tools you have at hand, and we're here to listen.
Okay, basically, what I would like to do is I would like to build on the Mohawk Greenwich brownfields and try to contain the pollutants that are already there. It is not clean. I would like to clean it as much as possible. I was originally planning to take and redo the job that Wes had already started, but that is impractical now. So I would like to contain what we do have, which I think I can do. And I'd like to build on basically an Epcot style, loosely based on Epcot at Disney. Build an area which I would be in control of. I would need council to sign over unencumbered. I'm being yelled at from another line. But anyways, I would like to build an Epcot themed area in the brownfields. I would also like to, I will be able to accommodate the native rights and lands down. Everything that they've asked for so far. And I hate it when I get this. I'm getting yelled at by my wife. Just one moment. I'm sorry. My counsel, just a minute. Okay, now I'm getting yelled at more. So anyways, what I want to do is build an Epcot themed park. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm getting really distracted. Wrong timing. But anyways, I need to have the land signed over to me, which I will guarantee if I have not fulfilled made huge steps, it will be privately funded. No taxpayer money will be spent. I will build a themed park. It was not specifically themed, but it will be based on cockshuts. It will have restaurants. It will have native health. It will have Lansdowne Center. I can accommodate all of those in the theme that I have planned. I will start to build probably within a year. It will just be. It will benefit all residents of Brantford, not just a few. And that's basically what I have to say. I'm sorry I'm so distracted right now. I intend to I already had a plan in place. There will be parking. There will be a facade of 18 to 1900s. The museum will be in there. It will be a working museum. It will not basically be plow shears and things like that. It will be a working museum in tribute to the Kasha and the early Brantford industries. We'll have wheelwrights, wainwrights. There will be there will be courtyards where activities will take place. Basically, that's it. There will be a park to begin with on the Greenwich side of the tracks to eventually be built up like the Mohawk side, with a building all the way down and containment for the pollutants around the perimeter. I hope to eventually within 30 years have the pollutants drained from the Old Massey, Cockshut, and Stripes properties. And that's basically all I have to say. But I would need unencumbered ownership of the land so I could afford to do all this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Birch. We have a couple councillors that are going to ask you some questions, so don't go anywhere. Stay on. Councillor Carpenter.
I intend to stay on.
Thank you, Mr. Birch.
I know it's rather disjointed.
What is the name of your development company?
I do not have a name for the company yet. It's basically residents of Brantford.
Oh, so you're not incorporated, you don't.
It will be a profit-making business.
Yeah,
However, it will benefit all residents of Brantford. All effort will be made to benefit all residents of Brantford.
I just want to be clear, you want us to give you the land for free?
$1. Very
Well-
much like my land was given, like my land was sold to the Dohertys during the, I am from the Berks Tract.
Yeah, so you'd like us to give you, do you live in the city?
Yes, I do. In fact, I live in the area now.
Okay, so you want us to give you the land and you're going to build something that's profitable?
I am going to build something that is very profitable and will bring back the theme of Brantford and Brantford early industrial. It will be a working museum
No.
that will turn a profit.
Are you suggesting that we give it to you without talking to anybody else in the community to see what anybody else would like to put on the property?
Basically, yes, because if for my plan to work, I need the entire area.
What entire area? How much land are we talking here?
We are talking the Mohawk, Greenwich, Old Massey complex, right up to and including where there were wartime heritages. I will take over that land, but
okay,
they can still use it.
So you're asking for all of it? Okay, I got you. Right. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Councillor Utley, were you next?
My questions were answered. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Do not see any other questions. We have about 2 minutes here, if there is one. Not seeing any. Thank you, Mr. Birch. That all the councillors have asked what they wish to know, and we'll be moving on to the next.
Well, in closing, I'd just like to say,
Certainly.
Brantford has made some mistakes in its past. I would like to rectify those, and I would also like to be involved in the Mohawk restoration area as well. I feel that my input will be very beneficial to the city and to the residents thereof. We can build Brantford and get Brantford back on the map as we were in the 1800s. We were a well-known source and area in the 1800s. I would like to bring that back as being innovative and putting forth where we learned from the past to build on the future, making the perfect present. And that is all.
Councillor Vanderstelt, I believe you have a question.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. Hello, Mr. Birch. Thank you for your presentation. Appreciate that. During the course of all of the communications from the very beginning around the Mohawk Lake Working Group, were you in contact at all with anyone from the city or from Lansdowne or any of the other potential partners up until this point, or you're a standalone organization outside of those groups?
And now I am standalone. I have individual support, probably about 20 people that individually support me. We have not made a coalition or any such thing, no. But I feel my ideas are valid, worthwhile, and will benefit the majority of residents of Brantford. We can build on Brantford to make basically a larger form of what Simcoe was in their park. We can be innovative, and I would very much like to be involved in added infrastructure such as the water treatment plant, Mohawk rejuvenation, like a lake. I'd like to bring a lake back to what we had in the 40s, 50s. There's a great deal we can do on Brantford. We can make Brantford the epitome of what the future should be. I want to show people that we can learn from the past. We can build on what we perceive to be the future to be and make today the perfect present.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Birch. I appreciate the time you took today. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Birch. Thank you, Councillor Vanderstilt. We'll now move to the next portion. I would like to call on Ron Gasparetto, Manager of Real Estate, and Heidi DeVries, General Manager of People, Legislative Services, and Planning, to speak about this item. I need a mover and a seconder. Seeking a hands for moving, Councillor Utley, a seconder, Councillor Martin. And here we go. Who's speaking first, Heidi or Ron?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to the working group, Heidi DeVries, General Manager, People, Legislative Services and Planning. I want to thank the working group for having us here today and for the opportunity to deliver our final real estate strategy to you, which is building upon the real estate disposition framework we presented in 2020 to this working group, after which we received direction to go forward and to meet with the 9 community groups who had participated in the 2018 expression of interest process. So the report you have before you today is the culmination of a number of different conversations we have had with those working groups who are identified in that report, all 9 of them, and the final strategy that we in the Legal and Real Estate Services group are presenting to the working group for your consideration here today. So I'm going to provide you with a high level sort of summary, an executive summary of sorts of our recommendations in our report, and then I'll turn it over to Ron Gasparetto to provide you with some additional details of this conversations that we did have with those community groups who are involved in the expression of interest process. And I also just wish to thank all of the delegates who appeared today to provide the working group with their own perspectives and information on the report that's before you. So first of all, this report is actually threefold in terms of its real estate strategy recommendations. So what you will see in the report is, first of all, a response to the expression of interest process, whereby we are recommending that we continue forward with 2 of the community groups who finalize their plans through the expression of interest process and remain both interested and prepared to move forward with the acquisition of land in this area. And so those groups, as you've already heard here today, and you can see in the report, are Aboriginal Health and Lansdowne. And our recommendation is that we entertain a memorandum of understanding with both of those groups. As you already heard from Rita Marie Hadley, that was my recommendation, and Scott Lyons. That was my recommendation originally, so that these groups could each have an address for their applications for funding to their respective ministries. Having an address is extremely important in order to get funding from other levels of government. And MOU is the fastest way to demonstrate that both organizations, being the Corporation of the City of Brantford and each of the respective community groups, are committed to moving forward with the disposition of land in this area, while we work through a lot of the other technical details, some of which you've already heard here today from various members of council. For instance, is that a land lease? Is that an agreement of purchase and sale? Do you have clauses to ensure that we protect the public aspect of the property? All of which we have done in the past. I do want to specifically address the fact that our recommendation does say agreement of purchase and sale, as noted by Councillor Carpenter. It does not say what the compensation would be for the lands. I anticipate that both this working group and council would support a nominal transfer, but that the actual value of the transfer be built into the agreement as a grant. And that would form essentially council's contribution to the capital campaign of each of these organizations, which will have to be underway, I'm guessing, in order for them to fully support capital projects of these nature. That is not a specific direction in this report, because that is sort of a down the road conversation as we work through the details of the agreement of purchase and sale with each of the organizations. What we are looking for today is a commitment on the part of the working group to move forward with the recommendation to dispose of the land to both of those groups. I also wanted to address the question from Councillor Martin, land lease versus sale. This has come up in the past, albeit at a very high level at the working group, and it was staff's recommendation that we enter into agreements of purchase and sale, not land leases, with these respective organizations. That reason is twofold. You will see our recommendation with respect to the museum groups who have located on this site already or are in the process of locating, whereby we entertain leases for the land. In part, that is because of the sort of different funding models that typically arts and culture groups have, or the lack of funding that they experience when we hit certain economic climates. And we really want to ensure that we protect and preserve the lands when groups of that nature come onto the lands. And we often do and have our leases structured in a way that the actual the lease and the rent payable is similar to a grant on behalf of the city of Brantford. It's one of the ways that Brantford has and continues to support arts and culture in its community. With respect to these lands, we're recommending a disposition straight up of these lands to these various groups, but we can build in options, as Councillor Carpenter noted. In part, that's because capital projects of this nature are difficult to fund if you don't have underlying ownership of the fee simple interest in the lands, number one. And number two, we do not recommend that the city of Brantford acts in the capacity of a landlord when the tenant is building capital projects of this magnitude. That said, we can obviously take that conversation back through the MOU process. And if that's what one of the groups prefers for a specific reason, we can have that discussion, but we are recommending agreements of purchase and sale rather than the land lease approach. Ron Gasparetto can get into more details with respect to the conversations we had with the various community groups who did submit through your 2018 expression of interest process, and how we got to the point where we had 2 final groups at the table still, and where the other remaining 7 are. So if you have any questions about that, I've just asked that we wait perhaps until Ron Gasparetto provides some additional information, because he may answer some of your questions. The other 2 components of the strategy that is before you today, in terms of our final real estate strategy, involve the disposition of the lands that are located on the map that's located in your agenda package. I believe it's page 7 of our report, but page 9 of 46 of your agenda package, that form the basis for all of our discussions with respect to a potential real estate strategy. And so the lands that are shown as potential commercial residential development, which would be the most applicable to get into the hands of a private developer who could develop those lands, build out that Main Street orientation that the community was really looking for, and that sort of vibrant downtown, like a miniature downtown place to live and to work and to shop, eat. That we believe would be best left for an expression of interest, not straight up marketing this through a real estate agent. But I know it seems like a longer process. We do have some time. I know the community is really interested in seeing these lands develop sooner rather than later. But I think they're also interested in seeing them develop well and properly and in keeping with the vision that was set by the community and through this working groups process. So we recommend that we actually entertain an expression of interest process to see what the development community would come back with. We also know that we heard from the community there were some concerns about height here for residential development, and not having large condominium developments or large towers overlooking the residential properties that abut this land. That would all be controlled through zoning, by the way. The zoning is not in place for these lands. These lands would require an official plan designation and rezoning. The planning department is on the line and can speak to that in more detail, but I did want to identify that as well. So those concerns about height limitations would be done through the future zoning bylaw for these lands, but the expression of interest process is also an excellent way to discuss some of those additional details, facade, height, potential uses, and we are looking for market value rentals in this area, I believe, or ownership with the commercial ground floor, which would then generate the income that you would need, both in terms of tax income and the land value that we would be receiving. While it doesn't form a basis of this report, but would form the basis for a future report, we would recommend that any proceeds from the sale of these lands arising from the expression of interest process would be placed into a reserve account, and that reserve would form the seed money for the future municipal infrastructure. So that's the parkland that's potentially going to be developed in this area. And I say potentially because we don't have capital projects underway, but this was part of the visioning that was done for the area. So the promenade, a potential canal cleanup, the parklands, and all of that municipal infrastructure that would come together to make these lands that incredible space that this community has visioned and this council has visioned it to be. So that's the first step in our real estate strategy to getting to that seed money and that private development on this site is the expression of interest process for those commercial residential lands. And finally, but not at all least, we are recommending strategic retention of lands. And so I know you asked us to bring forward a disposition strategy. There's a small portion of land, it's approximately 3 acres, abutting the potential future parklands that was identified as transitional potential institutional use. We do not have a community group out of the 7 or others in the community at this point that I'm aware of that are prepared to move forward with a potential capital project on these lands. However, we are aware that there is some interest in providing for somewhat of a museum district in the area. And we believe that if the city of Brantford was interested in retaining these lands, it would be a great place for a future growth of a museum district when you connect in the Canadian Industrial Heritage Center work that they plan on doing on the Timekeeper building location, as well as the work of the Canadian Military Heritage Museum on the lands where their current location abutting the park. That would create a bit of an L-shaped, if you jump the park, museum district that would then also contribute to the culture of the area. So when we look at the overall development of this area, and I will let the planners speak to the planning portion, where you're looking to bring all of these uses onto these lands to create that vibrant community, we believe this strategy would effectively help council realize their priorities on these lands. Again, we are not here to sell anything to the working group. We are here to present a potential strategy and absolutely take back any comments that you have if you don't like what you hear today. I also wanted to note, and we did hear this already through Councillor Van Tilburg's comments, we did what I would consider a significant amount of public engagement on this site. The comments that we received from the public are appended to this report. We did receive some comments after the report was finalized and submitted to the working group for the agenda. Those comments were provided to Tara Tran, and I believe either already have been or will be circulated out. And they relate to the comments Councillor Van Tilburg, Mr. Chair, provided already to Aboriginal Health about the use, the different services they provide, potential use for housing, what type of housing, and we understand there are concerns from the community about the types of housing that would be present on the site and the types of uses. So I wanted to acknowledge that, and also finally wanted to thank all of those members of this community, as well as the ward councillors who helped us get the word out that the city of Brantford wanted to talk and wanted to listen about this particular project. So it was just a great community effort, and it was a privilege to be a part of that. I also got my steps in walking my old neighborhood, so thank you for that. So Ron, if you wanted to follow up through the chair on the specific conversations we had with the 9 community groups, I think that would be helpful information for this working group. But that forms the conclusion of my lengthy executive summary.
Thank you, Heidi. Appreciate that. Through the chair, back in 2018, when the city initiated the original expression of interest, it was meant to capture, it was a large capture area, and the interest was to see, what groups had interest in possibly relocating to the Mohawk Lake District. And EOI's expressions of interest are very valuable tools, and they can help produce those types of results. When you get down into it, and we were able to then interview each of the different organizations and drill down into a little further as to their real needs. So starting off with the Aboriginal Health, very prepared, came with a lot of work, had done their homework. And as we went through the interview process, they were able to present a lot of information that really painted the picture of why they want to be located in this area. And Lansdowne as well. They were the most prepared. A lot of resources, you could tell a lot of resources were spent to prepare these presentations. So the good part about these interviews as well, let me add, is even though we're not able to, there's only so much land available, and so you can't please everybody, but I think we did. I think we were able to identify potential synergies that exist with other groups that were in the same process, and we were kind of able to get them to pivot and look at other alternatives, because some of them were thinking, well, maybe the city's going to build a facility and we're going to be able to lease land, or I'm sorry, lease office space or lease meeting rooms, that type of thing. And so we were able to direct those groups into existing facilities, and I'll get into that a little further as we go through each of the organizations. The Children's Safety Village, again, another fantastic to meet with, very well organized, and they do wonderful work in the city. And we did recognize, you know, the work that is being done by these groups is extremely valuable. And so, you know, we wanted to make sure that, you know, we gave them the time to be able to present their ideas, and that at the end of it, if it was, you know, it may not work, but let's figure out another alternative for you. And we were able to do that. So the Children's Safety Village, they were actually notified by their landlord that their option to extend was granted. And they're always a little hesitant about moving that far away from the Brantford Police Department headquarters. There's some real synergies there with Brantford Police, and they like the close proximity. So they did not opt to move forward in the process. Again, Participation Support Services, you know, another wonderful organization in the city that does amazing work. They were not in a short-term planning position either to move forward with you know, moving their facility, but they did say that they are going to be looking at you know, maybe a potential future expansion at their existing location at 10 Bell Lane. The Brant Theatre Workshops. You know, this is a great news story as well, with council approving the lease with the Canadian Industrial Health, or sorry, the Canadian Industrial CIHC. They had decided that we're going to get in contact with them, and there's some possible partnerships that could exist. So they're speaking with CIHC. The Brantford Symphony Orchestra, they were more interested in actual built space. They weren't really looking at you know, building something on their own. They just don't have the resources to do that, or the funding. So we were able to put them in touch with Laurier University. And so there might be some opportunities for the Brantford Symphony Orchestra to work with Laurier to explore use of vacant space at the Market Square. So in conclusion, the interviews conducted were very helpful in determining to drill down into the needs of these different organizations. And Lansdowne and Aboriginal as well coordinated their efforts, and realized that with their previous land requests, there wasn't enough land for both of them. So they got together and hired the same architect, and were able to work and come and capture synergies and facilitate a better functional design for both organizations, and to maximize efficiencies. So it was an excellent process. There was originally 9 submissions, and we interviewed 6. The other 3, they opted to not proceed with the interview process, as they were not in a position to proceed.
Thank you, Ron. We have some questions. Councillor Carpenter.
Yes, thank you. There's an awful lot here, and it's all in one resolution. Is there a reason why you put it all in one resolution?
Through the chair, are you referring, Councillor Carpenter, to the first portion of the resolution? I think there are 5 separate. I'm just going to that aspect of the report itself.
They're moved all as one resolution, are they not? All the recommendations? At least they are in my report.
I have, through the chair, I have A, B, C, D, and E.
Yeah, all moved as one resolution, yes. Okay. All right. So you're asking that staff will be the ones that will separate the land, and who's paying for the surveying costs?
Sorry, through the chair, that would be done by a city surveyor, internal surveyor at this point, unless the other groups would like to hire a surveyor. But we have a significant amount of municipal, like I think we also need to establish municipal infrastructure, roads, setbacks. And so typically that's handled in-house through our own surveyors to protect city interests.
Okay, because when I read the report, it said that they would oversee it, but that's fine. And that means they're actually doing it. That's fine. Okay. Now the work, I got to go back to the map now, because the map is important. Now, we're talking about the map. You're talking about, that's the blue we're talking about. So why did we decide that we would put the Aboriginal Health Center up front? Was that a choice of the Aboriginal Health Center and Lansdowne Children's Center?
So through the chair, originally Lansdowne Children's Center was looking to locate on the, I'm going back down to the map, Councillor Carpenter, on the orange section, which yeah, it's orange. It's the 6.5 acres there. It's a prime sort of gateway piece of land that was originally slated for use as, and by slated, I mean, it's in this draft sort of concept plan here for the commercial residential area. Because this plan had been developed with significant consultation and input from the community, we asked that both groups go back and look at their plans to see if they could locate within the areas identified as blue institutional uses. Through those discussions, Aboriginal Health noted that they would prefer to be oriented towards the park because some of their programs may have a spill-off effect, not necessarily in the park, but with an outdoor, perhaps even an outdoor healing area. I'm sure Aboriginal Health could better explain those programs, but the orientation of both sites were identified with the two groups and working in consultation with both of those groups. We had several meetings together, joint meetings, and their architects were also working together to identify how they could best utilize this land and provide for shared services, like, for instance, parking or even the development of their infrastructure. If the builds go forward together, there may be some synergies which could result in efficiencies, which could result in cost savings for both of the groups.
When you talk about the land that you're talking about going up for expression of interest, are you going to get a value on that land first?
Through the chair, we already have an appraisal report in the works. It's just not in our hands at this point, but we're getting the entire property appraised, Councillor Carpenter, so that we can understand what the value is, both if we go for a nominal APS with the community groups, we know what that value is for our contribution to their capital campaigns, and we know what the value is ahead of time when we go out for an expression of interest. We are not looking to grant those orange lands. We're looking for market value or higher, frankly, because the market's high right now. So appraised values tend not to be what the sale price is. Also looking to be able to control somewhat the type of development that goes on that property more than what you can simply do through a zoning bylaw.
Yeah, and the property hasn't been zoned yet. That has to be done too, is it not?
That's correct.
Okay, and then the zoning, who's paying for the zoning?
Would be up to the private developer.
And they want the lands that we're going to give for a nominal fee. Who does that zoning?
So through the chair, I think, Ron, if you can refresh my memory, I believe we had indicated that it would be up to each of these groups. There was a conversation on the museum portion, but I think both of the community groups would be responsible for their own planning processes. The only one that city staff undertook to conduct on their own was the Canadian Industrial Heritage Centre lands, which I believe were already redesignated through the city's new official plan, thanks to a motion from the floor, but will require rezoning. That would be a staff initiated rezoning for those lands. The city retains ownership of those lands and we are the landlord.
Okay, and indeed you recommend—
Councillor Carpenter, you've hit your 4 minutes. Would you like to go on the list again?
4 minutes. Okay, put me back on the list. There'll be about 6 times.
Yeah, I'm doing the 4 minutes. That's what we did last time. Councillor Martin?
Thank you. My question is probably what Councillor Carpenter was about to ask. Section D, it's talking about establishing a new committee. What's the reason for establishing a new committee instead of just reporting back to this one?
Through the chair, actual resolution, or sorry, I apologize, recommendation was drafted. It looks like it wasn't the final version, that was missing an amendment. So this was drafted prior to the report from Tara Tran being drafted for this working group. And I did amend that version of the report to say that either you establish an EOI separate evaluation committee, or alternatively, you could choose to continue on and expand the mandate of this working group. The mandate of this particular working group does not currently include acting as an evaluation committee for an EOI process, because that was not contemplated at the time that the working group was established. So if you wish to maintain this working group, which is absolutely within your right to do, I believe Ms. Tran has a separate report saying you may wish to expand your mandate to continue on to provide that sort of strategic advice to council. So staff would continue to report in. This working group would become the evaluation committee, and also you would become a committee that could help direct staff on the other operational side. So there's a significant amount of city work to be done still on this site, and certainly it would make sense to maintain this working group. So that is an alternative and absolutely can be moved by this committee.
Okay, and I believe there's a resolution later in the agenda to look at the mandate of this committee. So would the best option then just be to strike D and deal with it with the next resolution and expand the mandate of this committee?
I have alternative wording, and I apologize. There were two versions of this report. eScribe wasn't working on Friday, so I sent the one in through the clerk's department. They seem to have uploaded the one without the alternative wording. So all you would have to do really is somebody could move an amendment to D to say, or alternatively, this working group, should the mandate be expanded. So if the person taking the minutes wants to add that, any member of this committee could move that amendment and just say D be amended to include, or alternatively, the working group, should the mandate be expanded. And if you choose to expand the mandate in your next decision after receiving Ms. Tran's report, then you could use that as the evaluation committee. I can't in this recommendation basically create this foregone conclusion that you will choose to expand your mandate. So I would recommend that it is included as an alternative wording in the event that that vote fails. And then you still have some direction to establish an evaluation committee. Again, alternatively, we could go out for the EOI and you could establish an evaluation committee as council later on. But I think it's best probably to have that discussion here to make that recommendation to committee of the whole from this working group.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll move the alternate wording that was provided by, oh, and I see Councillor Utley's seconding that. Thank you, Councillor Utley. I think it's better for that information to come back to this committee, and I'm going to support expanding the mandate of this committee when that resolution comes up. So I think that's the best way to deal with it. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Martin, we'll do that once everyone's had at least an opportunity to speak as it reads right now, one speaking opportunity, and then I'll give you an opportunity to move that amendment.
Okay, as you wish.
Mayor Davis.
Thank you, thank you, Mr. Chair. So we do have A, B, C, D, and E on the floor, right? It's been
yes
for discussion. Okay. Well, first of all, I want to thank staff and all the residents. I mean, this has been a very long process, many prior councils as well. You know, process isn't finished, but this clearly is a milestone that we're actually beginning to plan for some some really kind of exciting development that will take place on these lands, at least a portion of them to begin with, that will definitely benefit our community, our area. And it's only come about as a result of a lot of work on the part of staff and a lot of different departments being involved. And I commend them. We got a lot more work to be done, but it is exciting to see that we are achieving certain objectives and moving forward. It's been a pretty fascinating, interesting process that will continue. Question I have about, so if I look at the comments from the neighborhood, concerns about, say, the park area and what kind of park is going to be in there, and how does that interact with a potential museum hub, that sort of thing. So would that be one of the mandates of this group, to kind of as a secondary task to begin some of the work on that? Because that's really nothing has been done on that other than just some different ideas have been kicked around. Where would that likely go? What would the timeline and the steps be in dealing with that part of these Mohawk lands? This really deals with the part that's kind of at the front, which is sort of the private development. But what about those lands? What's the timeline and steps look like for that?
So through the chair, I'm going to attempt this one, and I'm sure Tara Tran can jump in if she sees fit, but it's a great question. We were tasked through Legal and Real Estate Services with the disposition strategy. So now the attention of this working group, should you wish to expand your mandate, could turn to the development of the municipal portions. So at the ELT, so the executive leadership team level, there will be a discussion on appointing a lead for that particular project. So Ms. Tran has been the lead on the planning side. We now need a lead on the operational side, which is the development of all of these municipal projects. And that lead would then draft a plan and then report in either to committee of the whole, or again, if there's an expanded mandate, this working group. And I believe Ms. Tran can speak to that when her report is up, and I believe it's up next on this agenda. And so absolutely, if that's the decision here today, this working group could expand its mandate to become that first reporting body for the operational side for the municipal projects. And certainly I think there are some benefits in terms of all of the the knowledge that this group has now about this site, about the community's interests, and having received so many delegations and comments from members of the public as well. And that will be a very important component of this project, because it does contain really the public facing portions of this site, or the public assets, I should say.
And what about the interaction or intersection between, I mean, some of what we saw from Tara included the canal, right? And some very exciting potential development, promenades, that sort of thing. What's the intersection going to be, or suggested that be, between this group, which is really focused on these particular lands, and the canal and the lake and the Mohawk Lake Working Group? That's one part that is not very clear to me. How do we kind of make sure that they're either together, or if they're working, operating separately, that the synergies are being captured and used to the benefit of the entire area and the city?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Mayor Davis, I'll take the question on the other groups. The other group, it's a reminder to the members of this working group that the other group is not a task force of council. They operate at a citizen level with political representation at other levels of government. That being said, though, they've done a great job of making sure that they interact with the city and keep apprised of this working group's efforts as well. I think the citizen group is at a point where they're willing to adjust their efforts and do whatever they can to assist, but they are more interested in the water quality element. So they will be more focused on that element. And then there are other municipal type projects that this working group would participate or have more of an advisory role in. So that's my understanding of how those groups interact, and it might be up to the two groups to speak further to better define how they might work together or what kind of relationship they might have. But it is noted the other Mohawk Lake group is a citizen group and not a committee of council.
Well, just last
Thank
comment.
you, Mayor Davis. Could I put you on the list for a second speaking opportunity?
Please do that. Thank you.
And Councillor Utley, you're next, speaking to the motion as on the floor.
Which is, remind me again, please.
It's the 5 points.
The 5 points. Okay, I got it.
You have your hand up. I know you had your hand up previous. I think it was to
Yeah.
support Councillor Martin. I didn't know if you wanted to speak to this, or if not,
Yes.
we'll let Councillor Martin bring forward his amendment.
I just want to speak to the overall motion
Very
that's
good.
on the floor, Mr. Chair, if I may. First, I'd like to thank staff for getting us to this point. It's been a long, long journey. And I'd also like to include the Brownfields Committee, because they played a role in this project and process for many, many years. Very dedicated group. And also, the working group members. We're starting to see some real traction now of all the talking and the planning and the frustrations and the cleanup of the site. We're at that point where we're on the verge of starting to develop it. And that is really, really exciting, especially to the people that live in the immediate area. I think the thing that drives me most is the presentation we had that visualized what this canal site can look like. And I still have that pictured firmly in my mind of, wow, it really is going to be a wow factor for the people that visit our community and live in our community, and especially those that live immediately in the area. So I'm really pleased to support this, and also to adjust what's on the floor to reflect, I think, the dedication of this working group, that I think we can, handle these new challenges. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Utley. Councillor Martin, would you like to bring forward your amendment?
Yes, thank you. So moved.
And that is to expand the working group's mandate, or is that?
No, that's another resolution.
It's number D, and it is to add an and/or, is that to it? Just to make sure it's clear for us?
Yeah, it's the wording that was provided by Heidi earlier that was missing from our report because of the technical problems with describe at the moment, but essentially, or to report back to this group if this group's mandate is expanded.
Very good. Just trying to make that 100% clear. Speaking to the amendment, Councillor Carpenter, I believe you were first, and then Councillor Utley.
I got some concern how the amendment was worded from our city solicitor, because the word says and/or. And I thought the intention here from Councillor Martin was that this be the working group. And the and/or doesn't do that. The and/or says, well, it goes back to council and council will decide. So it gives council the option. So I'm not happy with that wording. I would rather be, if you're going to do it, then you make it this working group. And I say that in all honesty, because I've been on this committee since its inception to try and make sure that this moves forward, and all the public meetings and all the public locations. I have not missed any. So I just have some concerns about the and/or, and I wonder if Councilor Martin will consider just making it clear that if he's going to make this the working group, let's make this the working group. Thank you.
I believe that there was no and in the original wording provided by the solicitor. She can correct me if I'm wrong, but the wording was such that if the mandate of this committee is expanded, then it de facto becomes the committee to look at any offers that come in. The only reason for the or being there is if the next resolution fails and the mandate is not expanded, then it would require a new committee to look at that.
Okay, thank you.
So that's why the and/or is there. Okay, because we'll go to the next step.
There's no and.
There is no and.
D is laid out as it is in your report with a proviso added, or if the mandate of this committee is expanded, it becomes the committee that these come back to.
Excellent. Councillor Utley, did you wish to speak to this? I know you had your hand up earlier, and then we'll go to Councillor Vanderstelt, then the mayor.
I'm good, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Vanderstelt on the amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Van Tilburg. You're doing a fine job this morning. You're on the ball. Thank you. Could we, if at all possible, could we just have a copy of the amendment on the screen? It may be a little bit confusing for the viewers at home to follow what just happened. Just want to make sure that we have it on the screen so we all know what we're voting on.
Sorry, Heidi, I allowed you to share the screen. One moment. Go ahead, Heidi.
Darlene, I just sent it to you in an email message, but I can attempt to share my screen. One moment. So if everyone can see that, this was the resolution that should have been published for you. So if all you would have to do is repeal and replace D with the wording before you, it's a little easier than trying to figure out which comma you're moving. So it's that an evaluation committee be established for the purposes of evaluating responses to the Mohawk Lake District EOI identified in recommendation C above, consisting of the Mohawk Lake District Plan Working Group, or should the working group not expand its mandate, the mayor, both ward councilors, etc. And so that gets, Councillor Martin is correct, there is no and. It's simply that if the next motion fails, we cannot predetermine that this working group will expand its mandate, hence the alternative option to have an alternative committee. But it would be the intent of staff to recommend to you that this working group remain in place for the purposes of being the EOI committee, if that is your choice. Is that sufficiently clear?
Thank you very much, Heidi. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Vanderstilt. Mayor Davis?
Yeah, I must be slow in the mark this morning. I still don't know exactly what the wording is here, so, of the amendment, so. It's not actually in here. It hasn't been given to us in text.
Through the chair, your worship. So originally the wording was, or the wording that Councillor Martin has moved was consisting of, and I think the current resolution in front of you is consisting of the mayor, both ward councillors, and it was the opposite of this. So, or if the working group expands its mandate, the working group would be the EOI. You can, it's easier actually. You can just repeal and replace D with the language in front of you on the screen. Yeah. It's cleaner.
Yeah.
If Councillor Martin chooses.
Hopefully will.
Absolutely.
And I assume that's good with the seconder. Councillor Utley, I believe you were the seconder. Right on. So
yes, Mr. Chair.
Repeal and replace. Are you finished, Mayor Davis?
Yeah, I just wanted to clear that up. I think it is to my, yeah. Yes.
Okay. Seeing no other speakers, let's call the vote on Clause D, the amendment. Be doing it by a show of hands. And that looks like it passes unanimously. Second time speakers, Councillor Carpenter. On the motion as amended.
Thank you. Thank you. Get back to my train of thought here. Oh, looking at the map, when you talk about the position of the map, you talked about the transitional institutional mixed use lands as being possible location for museums. Wouldn't it make more sense if that was switched to the far right-hand side of the map so that it was next to the Canadian Military Museum and that the green space that's there was pushed over to what will be the marketable space for that we're talking about for selling off for housing. Then you got green space surrounding the housing property on both sides, and you actually have the walkway that needs to be replaced that goes to Drummond Street. They'd actually walk across to the park, into the park, as opposed to into an institutional facility.
Through the chair to Councillor Carpenter, I'll take this question as it was produced during the planning process. The choice of the parcel's location or configuration as you see it is deliberate. The idea is that the main street concept of the plan is a significant component of the plan to really knit all the pieces together. And it is in our planning experience that having the main street be continuous and connect to the existing streets, Drummond Street to the north, Emily Street to the south, is important to maintain a uniform street alignment. And that is why the blue parcel is located fronting a main street, so that there could potentially be storefronts or office fronts onto a roadway or a main street idea, and then backing on to the green space. There's also a component that the transitional institutional space acts as a buffer between potential large events that might be hosted on the open space and between the sort of the 2.7 acre orange space that might actually include some residential uses in it. So again, a buffer between the open space and the orange potential residential space.
Oh, thanks, Tara. It's good for the reminder. The other point I wanted to raise was the opportunity, for example. Well, first of all, did staff get my comments about in the sale that we have if the institution decides to move, they get to sell it back to us for the same cost, similar to we had from Mohawk College when it was on Elgin Street. Okay, because I don't want to lose the public. A lot of public money has been spent on this property, and it's very important that the public gets the best value out of it. So secondly, and then is there an opportunity for us to somehow in the future keep in mind that this is called the Greenwich Mohawk District for a reason? It goes all the way up to Mohawk park, and it gives opportunity for the first Six Nations to develop the glebe lands, and it gives an opportunity for us to make this green and institutional for the community all the way up to Mohawk Lake. That we have a program that says that if land or buildings in between that come up for sale, the city be in purchase them directly. Do we need to look at that going forward in some kind of a program so we make it clear that we're interested in doing that? And expropriation is one idea, but I mean, taking them up as they come up for sale. It doesn't make sense that we have a scrapyard next to what is going to be a rebuild part of the community. If that becomes available, we would want to, I think, clean some of this up in the whole neighborhood. We have a railroad tracks that goes right through the middle of this site. Because of failure of past councils to move this out of there, we now have that site hasn't been cleaned under the railroad tracks, if I understand. Is that clear? We have not cleaned under those tracks? Tara?
Through the chair to Councillor Carpenter, that's correct. The railway tracks are not remediated as they're privately owned. There are risk management measures to ensure that there is no passing of contamination between the city-owned side and the private-owned side. And to your other comment earlier, question earlier, I want to point out that the Mohawk Lake District Study area does extend all the way along the canal. So it's all the way the extent of the canal.
Yes, yeah, and I just wanted to make sure the committee recognized that. Not all members of the committee have been on it for that long, and I just wanted to make sure that when we missed the opportunity to actually purchase those railroad tracks that would have cleaned up this and many parts of Clarence Street is unfortunate, but the opportunity may come forward in the future. But I want to keep that open so that we as a committee keep those opportunities open. I would hate to see us miss an opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carpenter. Mayor Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm not going to go further about the mandate because I guess that's coming up next, but a question for staff, in particular Heidi. We've heard from the neighborhood that have a concern about some of the uses that are being, considered here. And is it possible to build into an agreement, let's say, I don't mean to center them out, but let's say, for example, the Aboriginal Health Center, that would prevent certain, let's say, uses for that property, prohibit certain uses of being used at that property. Thinking in particular, safe consumption sites, some of the other concerns I had. How do you build that into, let's say, whatever agreement there could be in place?
So through the chair, it's a little complicated, but typically the way that you would do that, because you're also a municipal council and you're a planning decision maker under the Planning Act, you would do that through zoning. So your zoning bylaw is your mechanism to restrict certain land uses. We don't typically use agreements of purchase and sale to attempt to restrict land uses because they're private contracts. You'd have to sue on the contract. We could look at restrictive covenants, but I'm pretty sure the law on that about as well as anyone else in this group. And it's certainly something that we could undertake in terms of some research with respect to restrictive covenants, but it is the planning process through which you would identify appropriate land uses for the area and would justify those land uses through planning rationale.
Or you can do both, such as was done with the Glenhurst lands. Right. Okay. I don't have anything to add further to what I said previously, Mr. Chair, other than once again, thanking and commending staff. And I think the biggest challenge for us will be, the next step is, the purpose as we set this up is dealing with the lands that would be, let's say, for more private development. But the bigger, more interesting challenge, I think, will be, the streetscape, how we lay out the streets, the green, the other institutional area and the green area, what that looks like. And not to mention the intersection with the Mohawk Lake Working Group, if I can call it that. There's lots of potential here, lots of more interesting work to be done, but I can certainly support this as it's moving us to the next logical stage of the development of these lands, taking into account neighborhood concerns and the interests of the community and the greater area as well. Please support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Davis. Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Question through you to Tara. You talked about the Main Street connecting straight through to Drummond. Is the intention to build vehicle bridge over the canal for Drummond, or just to rebuild the pedestrian bridge?
Through the chair to Councillor Martin, it hasn't been determined either way. The existing pedestrian bridge is something that the Parks Department is interested in restoring. Whether or not there is a vehicle component to crossing the canal would have to be studied further.
Okay, thank you. And for the orange area, is it envisioned that it might be something along the lines of the mixed use that's going on the old Canadian Tire site with the commercial on the ground floor with the residential above that?
That could be an option, yes. It would definitely be a mixed use and encourage that commercials on the ground floor with residential above.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Councillor Vanderstel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I decided against asking the question I was going to ask, but thank you. I appreciate it.
Very well then. Seeing that we have no other speakers, call the vote on the motion. As amended. Raise hands. And that looks like it's passed unanimous. Which moves us to 4.2. I call upon Tara Tran, Senior Planner, to speak to this item.
Through the chair to the members of the working group, I have no presentation today other than to welcome your questions on the report as you see it. The idea is that at this point, the mandate that exists for this working group is concluded or coming to a conclusion, potentially following this meeting, and you have an opportunity to expand it. We need to follow the city's procedural bylaw and identify a new mandate with new meeting schedule and ideally specific tasks that this group will work on. So I'll leave it at that and any questions you have.
Thank you. We need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Vanderstelt, seconded by Councillor Utley. It's now on the floor. Any discussion regarding just option 2 of the report and expanding the mandate of this working group? Mayor Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just so to be clear, what's on the floor is option 2, not option 1, right?
That's what it says on my sheet.
Yeah, because I'm looking at the task force report that appears at page 33 of the agenda material. I'm assuming that's what we're dealing with. So I guess my concern is this, that the way option 2 is worded, I think reflects the motion or resolution we just passed, in particular that paragraph D, which is we want this group to continue working on this district, this Lake District area, because we've got a lot of expertise and we've heard a lot of information, gathered a lot of information so far. But there is the other part of these. This is really option 2 is really directed, I think, to working with staff and assisting in kind of the layout of the streets and sidewalks in this area, and also those orange lands and the disposition of those orange lands and being involved in that. But we have the remaining blue land and the green land, and I don't think this option extends the mandate of this group to consider that as a sort of second stage of what we work on or what we might consider working on.
Would you like to
help us there? Do we need to
that, Tara?
I'll just clarify that Mayor Davis is correct that at this time, the mandate under option 2 would more reflect the potential disposition or real estate strategy as outlined in the previous report. And there is an opportunity to be more specific about potentially overseeing municipal projects, other municipal projects.
Well, if we wanted to consider being a little more ambitious about the mandate for this group, because I'm just seeing, really kind of grappling with this morning, what would that look like? What kind of wording we might want to consider? I guess one option is we just leave it as it is and we focus on that as our first task, and then later, if it's still within the term of this council, we consider again amending the mandate of this task force. But I think the concern is that I believe the community is looking to this group. They kind of want a go-to group for concerns or issues or a focus as we work to bring these lands back to some useful uses from where they were. And thus, why not add that since it is part of these lands? So I guess what I'm saying,
Is that
I'm
an
thinking out loud,
amendment?
I'm wondering if there needs to be an amendment, which would be B on option 2. And I'm quite figured out what that wording would be.
Okay, well, then we'll come back to that. Councillor Carpenter.
Thank you. I'd be happy to second the mayor's resolution on this. That includes all of it. I think we should stay together to get it all done. And the reason I say that is if you're talking about the disposition of the land that we're looking to sell, and that may include them wanting to, or us wanting them to contribute to the promenade, for example, along the canal. And part of that process, it may include us wanting them to say you have a large public consultation. I hope it would. I think we should also include in our mandate to make sure we get public consultation from the neighborhood as well. That should be right in our mandate to make sure that that's clear that we're doing that. I'd like to see that as well. So maybe this mandate needs a little bit of work from staff to give us some ideas about how we include all of it. And that would bring Parks Rec into it. It also deals with our development charges for getting revenue for the park. So it covers a lot of things that helps us fund it going forward for some of these pieces of land as well. So the strategy needs to be a little larger than just looking at this one piece. We should be involved to help facilitate even the sale that goes through for both the interest parties that we're talking about today, to make sure that that goes smoothly, that there's some way that we can make sure that that doesn't hit any glitches, that we can actually smooth over or get things done quicker to make sure that they reach their goals. And having the committee involved in all of those things, I think will help them and other groups coming forward to make sure they have someone to speak to on any of the issues or any of the concerns they may have. Thank you.
Any other speakers to the motion that's currently on the floor? Okay, Mayor Davis?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I agree with Councillor Carpenter. This needs a little more work, I think. And I really don't want to do this on the fly, because there's another element to this, and that is when we're looking at the lands that are kind of on the north side, the green lands, we want the input of the neighborhood, but we also need a method for input from Six Nations and Grand River, because the lands that are most potentially affected, since they're just across the canal, are the glebe lands, which are part of the reserve. So we don't really have a formal mechanism for that. And that kind of gets into that whole Mohawk Lake working group, which it's really hard to move beyond the development of water quality to, okay, what do you do with the lands around the lake and canal, unless we've got almost like a task force with Six Nations, the Grand River, because their lands are all intimately connected into this. So needs a lot of thought and consideration, and maybe it is after that we just leave it as it is and figure out what the next step should be after that. But I think it needs a little more thought and consideration by our staff. And so I'm not sure you think would be appropriate, Mr. Chair, but I'm struggling with what.
Well, if I could interject, perhaps we pass what's on the floor and add an amendment for staff to come back, I believe, with all the things that yourself and Councillor Carpenter have brought for our next meeting, so that we can get our foot in the door on the immediate projects and then set the stage for the upcoming, because I'm in agreement that I think that we shouldn't be doing this piecemeal. We've been working as a good team here, and let's just keep this thing moving and taking care of all the aspects. So if there's somebody that wishes to amend the current resolution in order for staff to come back with the items mentioned, I'm awaiting.
Okay, I'll try. An amendment would be, following your sage advice on this, Mr. Chair, surely, that we add to that option 2B would be, and that staff be requested to bring back a report at our next Mohawk Lake District Working Group meeting as to how the mandate might be further extended to deal with the balance of the Mohawk Lake, the Mohawk Greenwich lands, and potentially the other areas that are in this larger district.
And I'm assuming you're seconding this, Councillor Carpenter?
Yes, I would, and I hope the mayor would allow me to use the word holistic approach somewhere in that amendment. So that's what we're trying to do.
Very good. And any speakers to the amendment that's on the floor? Seeing none, let's have the vote for the amendment on the floor. And that is unanimous. And now I guess we can vote on the motion as amended, unless we have speakers for it. Seeing none, let's vote. Again, unanimous. And our final item of, it looks like Tara Tran and Maria Viscacci, our Director of Communications, are going to speak to this motion.
Through you, Chair, to the members of the working group, it will just be me at this time. Just letting you know that there is information on the working group's request to receive the cost of a billboard should the working group, this is in response to the working group having requested a billboard or looking into the cost of erecting a billboard to help promote the Mohawk Lake District in the area. And so what you see before you is the cost for a single billboard, a large size placed in concrete footings. And if you have any questions, please let me know.
Councillor Utley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Tara and Maria. Has a site been selected?
It would likely be located on city-owned property, and in the past I've heard discussion where it's best suited to be located on 22 Mohawk Street, which has frontage on Greenwich and Mohawk Street. That would be
I was
the
hoping
location.
you'd say that. Thanks, Tara. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, I guess we need a mover and a seconder for this. So moved by Councillor Utley, seconded by, need a hand, Councillor Martin. This is regarding the billboards. Any further discussion? Seeing none, raise hands for the vote. All in favor, it's unanimous. Minutes. I need a mover and a seconder for the minutes. Moved by Councillor Carpenter, seconded by Councillor Vanderstilt. Any errors or omissions seen? Hearing, seeing none. Any speakers? Hearing, seeing none. All those in favor, raise your hands. It is unanimous. We have the Mohawk Lake District Working Group minutes stated are being approved. Okay, there are no resolutions. There are no notices of motion. The next day of the meeting is to be determined. Seeing this, I believe we are adjourned. Thank you all.
Good
Bye,
job,
everybody.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Have a great day, everyone.
You too.